The little girl stood barefoot in the garden, her expensive shoes abandoned in the grass. Everyone else had left the party. She wasn't crying, but something in her silence screamed louder than tears. Then a janitor, pushing a half-broken broom, knelt beside her. What he whispered made her eyes widen, and what followed, no one in the mansion would ever forget. Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit subscribe for more videos like this. Let's begin. The billionaire's estate was nothing short of a palace. It had ivy-covered pillars, a marble driveway stretching longer than some highways, and chandeliers so massive they could light up the stars. It was the kind of place where money whispered, not shouted, because it didn't need to. But on that sunny afternoon, after the laughter from the children's party had faded, one person remained in the backyard. Madeline Pierce, age 7, hair in curls, wore a dress worth more than most families' rent. She stood in silence, arms folded tightly, staring at the row of trees beyond the trimmed hedges. From a distance, a janitor pushed a squeaky wheelbarrow filled with party trash. He was in his early 40s, tall with rough hands and sharp eyes. His name was Caleb Monroe, and no one at the estate ever called him by his name. Just janitor or you there, except for Maddie. She turned toward him, watching without a word. Caleb saw the way she was breathing, the barely there shake in her shoulders. He didn't approach right away. Instead, he paused, adjusted the glove on his hand, and softly said, "Want to hear a secret?" She blinked at him. What kind of secret? Caleb smiled, not the smile of a stranger or an adult trying to impress a kid. It was the kind of smile that meant something had weight behind it. "The kind that makes people stronger," he replied. Maddie hesitated. Her lip trembled. Then quietly, she sat down on the edge of the fountain, the sound of dripping water behind her. Caleb sat a few feet away. Not too close. Just enough. "You know," he began, his voice low and steady, "when I was your age, I used to stand in gardens too. But not like this one. Mine had weeds and ants, and the only thing shining was broken glass." Maddie's eyes lifted. "Did you live in a house like this?" He chuckled, shaking his head. "I lived in a one-bedroom apartment with 6 people and a dog that thought it was a cat. But we had stories that made those walls feel bigger." Maddie leaned forward slightly. "Tell me one." He looked at her for a moment, as if reading whether she really wanted to hear it. And then he began. Maddie's tiny fingers clutched the edge of the fountain, her white dress skirt tucked neatly under her. Across from her, Caleb adjusted his cap and leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, voice calm but weighted with something deeper than time. "My brother used to tell me stories about invisible giants," he said. "Said they lived in the cracks between buildings, in places nobody ever looks. But you could hear them if you really listened. You ever hear something no one else does?" Maddie nodded slowly. "Sometimes. When everyone's yelling, I hear a song in my head." Caleb smiled. "That's not just a song. That's your giant trying to talk back." Maddie blinked. Something about the way he said it made her believe it. Suddenly the garden door slammed behind them. A woman in a sharp navy suit with a phone to her ear marched across the stone path. Her stilettos clicked like gunshots. Her name was Vanessa Pierce, Maddie's mother, CEO of a tech empire, feared in boardrooms, cold as stone in her own home. "Maddie," she snapped, not looking up. "I told you to come inside 15 minutes ago. You have Mandarin tutoring at 4. Maddie didn't answer. She glanced at Caleb and then stood slowly. Vanessa finally noticed him and narrowed her eyes. "Why is she talking to you?" Caleb stood up, respectfully lowering his head. "Just cleaning up, ma'am. She asked about the hedges. Thought I'd answer." Vanessa didn't buy it, but she also didn't care enough to argue. "Stick to your job. You're not here to babysit." She turned to Maddie. "Now." Maddie hesitated. "Can I stay just 5 more?" "No." The girl flinched. Caleb didn't speak, but Maddie looked back over her shoulder at him as she followed her mother. And he mouthed just one word. "Later." That evening, Caleb sat alone on the estate's lower floor, a space no one ever visited. Gray walls, flickering fluorescent light, and the faint smell of cleaning fluid. He pulled out a small sketchbook from his locker and flipped through it. Page after page. Drawings of places, gardens, forests, fountains. Each one inspired by things Maddie had described in their past few stolen chats. He sketched them the way she saw them, not the way they looked. Because when a child sees something beautiful, it means everything. And at the back of the sketchbook was a single photo, faded and cracked, tucked between pages. A young woman in military fatigues, grinning with a baby in her arms. Caleb traced a finger over the photo's edge. "You'd love this kid," he whispered to no one. He didn't hear the small footsteps approaching until Maddie's voice interrupted the silence. "You draw?" He turned, surprised. She stood there in pajamas, clutching a stuffed panda, barefoot again. "Do your parents know you're here?" She shrugged. "They're yelling. They won't notice." He slowly sat up and gently closed the sketchbook. Maddie moved closer. "Will you tell me another story?" Caleb hesitated. Then he handed her a pencil. "Tonight," he said softly. "You draw it. I'll help." What began that night was more than storytelling. It was quiet defiance, a bond growing in hidden spaces between marble pillars and cold silver spoons. Maddie started sneaking down every other night, listening, sketching, asking questions no one else had time to answer. And Caleb, he told her things carefully. Not too much, just enough. Until one night, Maddie asked something he didn't expect. "Have you ever lost someone?" He froze. She didn't press. She just waited. Finally, he whispered, "Yes. Someone brave. Someone who saved me." Maddie blinked. "Who?" He looked down. "Someone who never knew they did." It was raining the next day. Softly, politely. Like the weather didn't want to interrupt the quiet wealth of the Pierce estate. But inside, thunder rolled in the form of voices rising from the study. Vanessa slammed a folder on her desk. "She's been sneaking off to the basement again? That's where the janitor's quarters are, Richard? Are we raising a daughter or a stray cat?" Richard Pierce, Maddie's father, barely looked up from his laptop. "She's 7, Vanessa. Kids wander. She's not building a meth lab. This is unacceptable. She's a Pierce, not a janitor's apprentice." Maddie, standing quietly in the hallway just outside the room, felt her chest tighten. She clutched the folded paper in her hand tighter. Her latest sketch, one Caleb had helped her finish last night. It was a drawing of a treehouse that never existed, but felt like home anyway. They hadn't noticed her presence. They never did, unless it involved appearances or appointments. She slipped the drawing back into her pocket and tiptoed away. Downstairs, Caleb was mopping the side hallway, humming a low tune only a soldier would know, a melody meant to calm your breathing in the dark. But when he looked up, Maddie was already sitting on the supply shelf, swinging her legs and waiting. "You ever get tired of being invisible?" she asked. He gave a half smile. "I used to. Then I realized, being invisible lets you see everything." Maddie was quiet for a second, then pulled something from her pocket. "I made this," she said. "It's you, I think." She handed over the folded paper. Caleb carefully opened it. A pencil drawing of a tall man with kind eyes, holding a mop like it was a sword. He was standing in front of a crying child, shielding her from a dark storm. He blinked. "That's quite the imagination." "It's not imagination," she replied. "It's what you do." Caleb opened his mouth to say something, but then, footsteps, fast, sharp. The head of security, a bulky man named Victor, stepped into view. "Janitor," he barked, "you've been called upstairs." "Now." Caleb glanced at Maddie. She looked worried. He gave her a wink and followed Victor. The room upstairs was cold. Vanessa sat behind her desk like a judge. Her tone was icy. "I'm terminating your employment effective immediately." Caleb blinked. "Ma'am?" "You've overstepped boundaries. My daughter has no business down in your quarters. And frankly, I don't care if she cried or begged. This is my home, not your memoir club." He stayed calm. "With respect, I never invited her. I only made sure she got back safe. I don't want your stories. I want your keys." He removed the ring from his belt and placed it gently on her desk. But before he turned to leave, he paused. His voice was low, firm, but not angry. "You ever wonder why your daughter sneaks out at night just to talk to a janitor?" Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me." "She doesn't need more rules. She needs someone to listen." And with that, he walked out. That night, Maddie was nowhere to be found. Panic erupted. Staff searched every room, the grounds, even the neighbors' properties. But Vanessa's hands trembled when she saw what had been left on Maddie's bed, a simple drawing, a sketch of the janitor and the little girl sitting under a tree labeled "Where People Listen." No words. Just that. And a folded note. "If I can't be heard in my own house, I'll go somewhere that does." It was nearly midnight when the doorbell rang at the city community center. Caleb had just finished wiping down the last table. The place smelled of chalk, sweat, and the kind of hope people stop believing in when life gets too loud. He wasn't expecting anyone, especially not her. When he opened the door and saw Maddie, soaked from the rain, hugging her panda with one hand and a backpack slung over her shoulder, he didn't say a word. He just stepped aside and let her in. "I waited until everyone was asleep," she whispered. "I followed the bus map you showed me once." Caleb knelt down. "You okay?" She nodded. "But I don't want to go back yet." He looked at her for a long moment, then sighed and stood. "Let's make some cocoa." That night, Maddie curled up on a padded bench under a worn quilt. The building's heater groaned faintly in the walls. Caleb sat across from her, flipping through the sketchbook she'd brought. Her drawings had improved, shading, proportion, even emotion. One picture caught his attention. It was of her, the woman in the photo he kept hidden in his own locker. A younger version, in uniform, holding a small child. His hand paused. Maddie noticed. "That's my mom," she said. His blood ran cold. Caleb set the sketchbook down gently. "What did you say?" "She used to be in the army, right? Grandma told me. Mom never talks about it, though." His voice was barely audible. "What's her full name?" She blinked. "Vanessa Elaine Granger. She only changed it after she married Dad." Caleb leaned back like he'd been punched in the gut. Vanessa Granger. The woman who once, on a bullet-scarred rooftop overseas, had pulled a wounded soldier from the rubble under gunfire and whispered, "You're not dying on me today." She'd saved his life. That soldier was him. The next morning, The community center buzzed early. Local families came in for breakfast services, job coaching, and school drop-offs. Caleb kept Maddie tucked safely in his office, but it wasn't long before the inevitable happened. A black SUV with tinted windows rolled up outside. Vanessa stepped out first, her heels stabbing the pavement like daggers. Her husband followed close behind, and the tension in the air was thick. When Caleb opened the door, they didn't wait for small talk. "Where is she?" Vanessa demanded. Before Caleb could answer, Maddie peeked from behind his leg. Vanessa's face crumbled, not with relief, but with something more complicated. Something almost guilt. "Maddie," she said, her voice softer than usual. "You scared me." The little girl stepped forward. "I just wanted someone to listen." Richard stepped in. "You could have been hurt, baby." "I wasn't," she said firmly, "because he protected me." Vanessa glanced at Caleb, and for a second, their eyes locked. She knew. The lines around her eyes deepened. "I didn't know," she said quietly, "that it was you." Caleb just nodded. "I didn't think you remembered." "I remembered your scream when they pulled you from the fire. I just filed it away, moved on." Caleb looked down. "I didn't." That afternoon, the three of them sat on folding chairs under flickering lights. Maddie sipped cocoa. Caleb and Vanessa talked, really talked, for the first time in years. He told her everything, how he'd returned broken, alone, how he found solace pushing a mop because at least it gave him a rhythm, how Maddie, her daughter, was the first light he'd seen in years. And Vanessa? She cried. For the first time in so long, she let her guard down. "I've been so focused on building everything," she said, "that I forgot what I built it for." When they left, Vanessa offered Caleb his job back. He refused. "I think I've got something bigger to build," he said, gesturing around the community center. "But thank you." Maddie hugged him tight. "I'll visit?" she asked. He smiled. "Only if you bring your pencils." 1 week later, the news broke across the city. Pierce Family Fund's Child Wellness Center in honor of unsung hero. And in smaller print, CEO Vanessa Pierce publicly credits a janitor turned mentor for helping her daughter rediscover her voice. 1 month later. The old overgrown lot near Easton and 5th had once been a graffiti-covered mess of chain-link fences and broken concrete. But today, soft music played from a speaker on a folding table. Kids ran barefoot across freshly planted grass, and Maddie Pierce, dressed in jeans and a hand-painted t-shirt, stood proudly with dirt on her cheeks. She held a large pair of safety scissors in her small hands, glancing nervously at the crowd. Next to her stood Caleb, now dressed not in a janitor's uniform, but a soft gray button-up and worn jeans. The center had named the garden after him. The Caleb Monroe Listening Garden, a place where every child is heard. Vanessa Pierce stepped to the microphone. The crowd silenced. She cleared her throat. "A few weeks ago," she began, voice unsteady, "I realized that a job title doesn't define someone's worth. What matters is the echo we leave in someone else's heart." She looked at Caleb, her voice cracking. "This man, this hero, reminded my daughter how to feel safe, and reminded me how far I'd drifted from what matters." There was no PR polish in her voice, no CEO bravado, just a mother owning her mistakes. She stepped aside, and Maddie approached the mic. Her voice was quiet but unwavering. "Mr. Caleb taught me that stories can build things. They built this place, and I hope more people find their voices here." Applause rose like a wave. And as the ribbon was cut, the garden opened, not just for kids from wealth, but for kids from shelters, schools, foster care. It became a haven. Later that evening, as twilight painted the garden gold, Caleb and Maddie sat side by side on a bench they had built together. She looked up. "Do you still have that old photo?" He smiled and pulled it from his wallet. "I think your mom was stronger than she'll ever admit," he said. Maddie nodded. "She's learning." "And you?" he asked. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I'm not invisible anymore." Caleb looked ahead, voice low. "You never were." As the wind rustled the leaves overhead, the bench behind them bore an inscription carved in wood: "To the listener who made the silence bloom."